Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Tavenor, and I lead our democracy program. So we know that a majority of Ohioans are worried about climate change and want to see their elected leaders take action. But for too long, gerrymandered electoral maps and voter suppression tactics have silenced the voices of our communities. Over the past 6 months, Ohio's democracy has been on a roller coaster, actually probably a little bit more than 6 months. For today's briefing, we're going to focus on what happened in the fight for fair state house maps during Ohio's redistricting process. And while it's not all good news, there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful as we head into the second half of 2022. Late last year, represented by the Brennan Center for Justice, the OEC Action Fund's affiliate organization, the Ohio Environmental Council, Ohio Organizing Collaborative, CARE Ohio, and 6 individual plaintiffs, altogether they sued the Ohio Redistricting Commission over the partisan gerrymandered state house maps that commission first adopted. The Ohio Supreme Court has ultimately ruled on the side of the people, striking down unconstitutional gerrymandered maps multiple times. That's right, actually the OEC and partners won 5 times in fights against fair maps. But unfortunately, federal courts intervened. More specifically, the Ohio supermajority and their representatives on the Ohio Redistricting Commission stalled until they could use a federal court to enshrine bad maps. It's important to name the members who consistently voted for bad maps and ran out the clock to force the federal court into enshrining these bad maps. Governor DeWine, Secretary of State LaRose, Auditor Faber, House Speaker Cupp, and Senate President Huffman. And in his official capacity back in March, Secretary of State Frank LaRose instructed boards of elections to begin implementing what is now known as Map 3, the third map created by the commission, before the Ohio Supreme Court had ruled on whether it was constitutional. And even though the Ohio Supreme Court ultimately invalidated Map 3, the federal court eventually implemented Map 3 as our state house map for 2022, specifically because LaRose began implementing it before knowing whether it was constitutional. The Ohio Supreme Court still retains jurisdiction and will likely take action at some point to invalidate Map 3 again and require a map drawing process for 2024 elections. However, the commission has ignored and outright disrespected the Ohio Supreme Court at every turn, utilizing the federal court as a tool to avoid their constitutional obligations. Sadly, the Ohio Supreme Court hasn't indicated that it'll take any action to force the commission to do its job. So how bad are these maps that we have to live with? The Ohio Constitution requires that a map may not unduly favor one party over another. It also requires that the districts proportionately reflect the way Ohioans actually voted over the past 10 years. Which roughly equals 46% Democrat and 54% Republican. At face value, the Ohio House map of Map 3 has 45 seats that lean toward the Democratic Party and 54 seats that lean toward the Republican Party. Similarly, the Ohio Senate map has 15 seats that lean Democrat and 18 seats that lean Republican. But these maps that lean toward specific parties theoretically do not necessarily represent the will of Ohio voters. The Ohio Supreme Court invalidated this map because of something called partisan asymmetry. It is possible that with only a 2-point swing in their favor, Republicans could win 74% of Ohio House seats and 79% of Ohio Senate seats, retaking their supermajority. And here's the kicker. A 2-point swing in favor of the Democrats would result in no additional seats for the Democrats. They would still only win 45 seats. It would take a truly historic 8-point swing so that the Democrats had 54% of the total vote of Ohio in order for the Democrats to achieve a 1-seat majority in the Ohio General Assembly. All in all, while Map 3 does create a pathway to stop a supermajority from continuing to exist in Ohio, the map has serious flaws. That's why the Ohio Supreme Court found it unconstitutional. So where does this leave us for redistricting? Possibly, under the status quo, we're stuck with an annual fight rather than every 10 years. The Ohio Redistricting Commission could continue passing bad maps and using stalling tactics until a federal court enforces the easy-to-use map. We may never actually see a constitutional 4 or 10-year district map for the Ohio State House. The process is ultimately dependent on political actors on the commission and the Ohio Supreme Court. If we have a new court makeup come January, the court could override its precedent from this year. The dissents have very much indicated they might want to do that. And if the commission never makes fair maps, Ohioans are going to need to pass a new constitutional amendment to create a new redistricting system. All that aside, we should be hopeful about Ohio's democracy. After this redistricting fight, people have witnessed the continued corruption of the Ohio supermajority out in the open. People understand the tricks they're using to rig maps. People recognize the legislation they attempted to pass to suppress voters. But more importantly, Ohioans should recognize that the supermajority is fighting so hard to hold on to its power because it recognizes that Ohioans aren't going to put up with this nonsense any longer. Ohioans demanded a fair map. Ohioans want a democratic system accessible to all. And when you talk to your friends about what happened this year, this redistricting debacle should be a rallying cry. The members of the commission must be held accountable for their actions. Ohioans must still stand up for justice at the polls and fight for our environment or whatever other issues they may care about. So that was a lot about redistricting, but what other democracy issues should we be watching? Unfortunately, the Ohio General Assembly under this supermajority continues to consider other voting rights, like stricter voting ID laws and enshrining restrictions around the use of vote by mail, drop boxes, and early voting. While the legislature is on recess for the summer and potentially through the November election, there are a few bills that we should watch that impact voting rights. For example, Ohio House Bill 650 and Senate Bill 320 are bad bills designed to restrict access to the polls through stricter voting ID laws. Limiting what identification can be used at the polls is a form of voter suppression that can discourage and stop eligible voters from otherwise participating in elections. Both bills currently sit in committee in the House and Senate, and if they move, whether before this election or after it, people need to be ready to oppose them and other voter suppression legislation. So that's all from me for today. To stay in the fight to protect Ohio's democracy in pursuit of protecting its environment, make sure you, of course, follow the OEC Action Fund. But we also encourage you to follow the Equal Districts Coalition on social media. Our C3 affiliate, the OEC, is part of the Equal Districts Coalition. The Equal Districts Coalition is continuing the fight for fair maps wherever that fight takes us into the future. We will not stop until we have fair maps, nor will we stop until we have a healthy democracy and a healthy environment. And don't forget that there's a primary coming up on August 2nd because of the way that redistricting turned out. Make sure you're registered to vote. Leave registration, it's on the screen here, registration by July 5th. And you're encouraging your community to vote as well.